From the headquarters of Telesur English in Quito, Ecuador, I am Estefania Bravo. This is From the South. Thousands of people in Venezuela have marched to defend state-owned oil company PDVSA against the new sanctions imposed by the U.S. PDVSA workers say the country will come together with courage and moral strength to defend the state oil company and its U.S.-based refinery, Citgo. The president of the National Constituent Assembly, Diosdado Cabello, addressed the gathering and rejected these actions.
They'll send planes. They will drop bombs and kill people. It doesn't matter to them. It doesn't matter to them at all. Today they could fly over in a plane and drop a bomb over here where we are. And for what reason? Because we are Chavista. When the United States decides to bomb, they make victims of children, hospitals, schools. They stop at absolutely nothing. I ask for people to be conscious. Those Venezuelans who are asking for an intervention against our nation, those who are asking for military intervention, at the time of an intervention, they will be regarded as an enemy of the nation.
The Venezuelan people should be aware that the oil industry belongs to us. Profits belong to all the Venezuelan people. And for that reason, the empire should know that if they come here, to the land of Bolivar, they are going to find people who will defend their country with their lives if necessary.
Our correspondent Luis Tavera brings us more.
Workers from the state-owned oil company PDVSA are marching in Caracas to reject the sanctions imposed by Washington against a state-owned oil company and transnational Citgo. PDVSA workers say that these new measures are just aimed at stealing their resources and taking over the assets of the country. Meanwhile, the foreign minister, Jorge Arriaza, has denounced a media war campaign that is trying to show that the government doesn't have any support. But the foreign minister says that the armed forces and the people have taken to the streets across the country to show their support to the Bolivarian government and Venezuela's constitution.
Foreign Minister Jorge Arriaza has denounced a media war against Venezuela, but peaceful scenes on the streets of Caracas have unraveled the plans of those on social media who hoped to show Venezuela as a country in chaos. Our correspondent tells us what the people in the streets think of this media war.
Popular support is still evident in the streets, even when facing a situation hoping to bring down Venezuelan democracy. The people are against the Venezuelan coup d'etat in their country.
International community, listen to us. We choose our president, Nicolás Maduro.
Social inclusion is another achievement that grandparents will continue defending.
As you can imagine, people are in streets defending Nicolás.
On the other side of the city, the opposition held protests for 2 hours despite low attendance. Everything was calm, with all the democratic guarantees that protect freedom of expression. Meanwhile, the revolutionary forces showed their strength and say that certain sectors of the opposition are playing with Venezuelan sovereignty.
They have evidence agreements with international business. They have supported the proclamation of an illegitimate president, usurping the post of president for which Maduro was elected. He has been chosen for 6 years, and he was elected by the people following the death of Comandante Hugo Chavez.
Venezuela will continue on the path of peace and confirm that there are clear constitutional means to preserve the country's sovereignty. They don't want interference.
Meanwhile, Venezuela's Interior Minister announced several arrests connected to recent violent acts in the country. Néstor Reverol says authorities have arrested a number of mercenaries and terrorists. He says they also seized weapons and materials that were going to be used to assassinate President Nicolás Maduro.
We, led by the President Nicolás Maduro Moros, will continue exercising in a democratic manner the legitimate authority according to the Constitution and the laws of the Republic in order to continue building the path to peace.
And Venezuelan authorities have rejected the European Parliament recognizing opposition leader Juan Guaidó as interim president. 429 European lawmakers voted in favor of the measure and 104 against. The Parliament is now urging all EU governments to follow suit. And during a televised address on Wednesday, the president of the Constituent National Assembly, Diosdado Cabello, rejected the moves by the EU to support coup efforts.
But how irresponsible of the European Union? They're committed to invasion and bombing. They don't care about their own citizens who live here. There are many who live here who arrived in the year 1950 and onward. They have their roots and businesses here, but they don't care about them. Today, when they make calls to invade Venezuela, it doesn't matter where the Spaniards are living. It doesn't matter to them if an international coalition comes to drop bombs over Caracas. In many neighborhoods of Caracas, you will find families which are descendants of Italians, Spaniards, Portuguese, and Germans.
The Canadian Labour Congress, representing over 3 million workers, has called on the government to promote dialogue in Venezuela. The labor movement said it was alarmed at the escalation of international interference in the democratic process in Venezuela. It also rejected a military solution to the crisis. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is among some world leaders that have endorsed Venezuela's opposition leader. And moving on to Cuba, where the 4th International Conference for World Balance is taking place in capital Havana. Participants of the 4-day event have discussed intercultural dialogue, the integration of new social movements, and the push for solidarity in Latin America and the Caribbean. The conference also showcased a debate of taking action in the face of a crisis based on the work of Latin American thinkers like Simón Bolívar and José Martí. Our correspondent Alien Fernandez from Havana has been following the conference and has the latest details.
The last day of the 4th International Conference for World Balance is underway in the Convention Center of Havana. One of the main topics that grabbed the attention of the more than 600 participants from all around the world is the political situation in Venezuela. They are discussing what the intervention of the United States and its allies means for Venezuela and the Bolivarian Revolution. Most participants are strongly rejecting these actions and measures against Venezuela and are analyzing and trying to understand how this international campaign against Venezuela and its president came to be. Regarding this topic, members of Venezuela's National Constituent Assembly and Professor Adán Chávez gave a talk yesterday. Another important topic of the conference is the international media and how some international media outlets have been channeling the narrative of right-wing governments and to target the Venezuelan government. One of the most interesting talks regarding this topic will be held by the French professor and journalist Igancio Ramonet, who will talk about media war in the age of fake news. Another topic that will be touched upon today is Puerto Rico's plea for independence.
Let's learn more about this conference that also coincides with the 166th anniversary of the birth of Cuban intellectual José Martí.
These intellectuals and social leaders arrived in Havana from all around the world. Their mission, to find new paths for dialogue and peace in Latin America. And in light of this, leaders held discussions about ongoing attempts by the U.S. to intervene in Venezuela's affairs in a bid to destabilize the South American country.
The participants are willing to help our Bolivarian revolution. They say they would do whatever is required, even to defend us against any military intervention. It is not what we want, but we are ready to fight for our ideology and our revolution.
Also on the agenda was a discussion about 60 years of the Cuban Revolution. The Bolivarian forces were called to resist the coup d'etat and to defend the legitimate government of Nicolás Maduro.
We are calling for dialogue in Venezuela. What we cannot allow is that someone comes to take office illegally. Maduro won thanks to the votes of the Venezuelan people. That opposition leader barely had thousands of votes in the parliamentary elections, while Maduro got millions.
The Spanish member of the European Parliament, Javier Couce, says the European Union has worked as an ally with the Venezuelan opposition to dismantle, through the use of undemocratic means, the Bolivarian revolution.
The European Union has acted as a mouthpiece of Venezuela's opposition. Different European bodies have worked to give a voice to Maduro's opposition instead of promoting a peaceful coexistence.
Social leaders, historians, and professors agreed that the goal is to dominate Venezuela's natural resources and at the same time put an end to the many advances made in the country and the wider region. Nicaragua is also being discussed at the conference. That and the call for the release of Luis Ignacio Lula da Silva, plus the main challenges of the left wing now that the new neoliberal governments are in power.
We'll be back very soon. Stay with us. Welcome back. Hundreds of indigenous people and activists are marching in 15 different cities in Brazil. They are rallying to defend the rights of their communities and denounce the increasing threats they continue to face today. Fears are on the rise, especially in Brazil, where the government is putting its economic interest over the protection of indigenous communities and their lands.
We want peace. All we want is peace. We want peace in our lands. We want to be able to live without people massacring us. And we just want to be left alone. We don't really want anything else than that. We just want our own space. We're not asking for too much. We just want to be able to live in peace.
I'm from the oldest indigenous reservation in Brazil. It was founded in the 1600s in Pernambuco. And I'm here today to show that as long as there are Indians standing, we're not going to give up fighting for our rights. And we're not going to bow to anybody above us, only God. The sky is the limit.
Our correspondent in Sao Paulo, Brian Muir, has more.
I'm underneath the Mosque Art Museum in downtown Sao Paulo, where shortly a large protest for indigenous rights is scheduled to kick off in Sao Paulo, in around 15 other cities around Brazil, and several cities around the world. Now, the protests have been called in response to Jair Bolsonaro, the new right-wing Brazilian president's repressive policies against indigenous peoples. In one of his first days in office, he turned over control of delegating authority over indigenous reservations to the Agriculture Ministry, which is dominated by agribusiness interests and the descendants of former slave owners and plantation-owning strongmen who've been responsible for most of the atrocities committed against indigenous people during the last 500 years. The name of the protest is not one more drop of indigenous blood spilled. And there's all kinds of unions and social movements coming out today in solidarity with Brazil's indigenous population.
We thank Brian for that report. Women, students, workers, and indigenous organizations in Ecuador took to the streets to protest against the economic policies of President Lenín Moreno. Protesters in capital Quito opposed rising fuel prices, privatization of public companies, talks with the International Monetary Fund. Those on the march demanded that the government issues debt forgiveness to state companies in order to halt the privatization of the public sector.
We have called together students, workers, and professionals to protest against all the measures the government is trying to force on us, starting from tax remission to the economic announcements made last December, including the proposals to privatize some public companies.
We're marching against the privatization of public companies, especially the public telecommunications company CNT. We are also marching against the rising cost of living and the elimination of fuel subsidies. When the government of Lenín Moreno took office, they said they would work for the poor. But governing for the poor should mean avoiding corruption and not giving away the CNT to privatization.
Indigenous authorities in Guatemala have warned President Jimmy Morales not to interfere in the upcoming general election in June. This as a political crisis follows the confrontation between the government and the UN Anti-Corruption Commission.
Leaders of different indigenous communities in Guatemala say that the mounting political crisis over President Morales' decision to expel the UNBACN Commission against impunity could hinder the upcoming general elections.
We are calling on the Supreme Electoral Court to assert its autonomy and ensure that the elections won't be impeded by what's happening right now.
The court has called for general elections on June 16th. Meanwhile, the government of Jimmy Morales has forced the International Commission against impunity out of the country. The commission has previously worked closely with the Electoral Court to prevent illicit electoral financing. Indigenous authorities fear that this will allow President Morales to guarantee candidates, donors, and political parties.
They are trying to stop investigations from going deeper into corruption cases and bringing concerns to light as soon as possible. What they are doing is distracting Guatemalans from corruption and preventing them from understanding what harm they do to society.
Jimmy Morales has managed to avoid facing justice for alleged illicit electoral financing, but two requests for preliminary hearings have been filed, one by former Attorney General Del Maldana, who is also a candidate for the presidency.
We know very well that their intention is to hinder general elections in 2019.
The upcoming general elections are marked by the current political crisis emerging from the strained relationship between President Morales and the Anti-Corruption Commission. The scenario has an uncanny similarity to the presidential elections in 2015, when President Otto Pérez Molina resigned over corruption accusations.
There is a call for Caribbean nations to unlock regional investments and match it with foreign capital. This to allow regional economies to grow. Barbados Prime Minister issued the appeal at the closing session of the Global Initiative meeting on Caribbean disaster recovery held in Puerto Rico.
If we simply bring capital from outside, we're only going to impose on the region transient capital that will remit dividends in the short and medium term. Within the Caribbean community, there's about $47 billion in savings. And right now, if those savings are left in the commercial banks, they attract a savings rate of 0.1%. Yet, businesses are borrowing at 7, 8, 9, 10% throughout the region. And the one thing that is part of our patrimony is renewable energy. We have a moral obligation to unlock renewable energy for the benefit of Caribbean people and to unlock the investments that are possible. But we've got to create the instruments.
Officials in Mexico City said that a recently launched firearms amnesty project is a success. The initiative allows residents to hand in weapons anonymously in a bid to curb gun-related violence in the capital city. During the week-long event, more weapons were handed in than throughout 2018. That includes a total of 444 firearms and grenades.
I came because I have my husband's weapon. He was a police agent and left his weapon. Then it represents a great risk because I have a daughter and my husband died 15 years ago. I'm handing it in because it serves no purpose to have that weapon. And apart from that, they also give you something.
Internet giant Google is paying tribute to late Argentinian singer Mercedes Sosa on the 54th anniversary of her first performance. On January 31st, 1965, the emblematic artist sang in the Cosquín stage in the Argentinian city of Córdoba. Sosa is recognized as one of the most important artists of Latin America, not only for her voice, but also for her political activism, which forced her to live in exile during the military dictatorship. Sosa passed away in 2009.
Mercedes Sosa nunca abandonó la del 4 de octubre de 2009. Latinoamérica.
We'll be back very soon. Stay with us. Welcome back. 47 stranded migrants finally came to shore in Italy after being blocked at sea for 12 days. The migrants had been trapped on board the vessel ever since their rescue off the Libyan coast. The standoff finally came to an end after 9 EU countries agreed to take them in. Italy's right-wing government has closed its ports to humanitarian vessels in an attempt to force EU partners to take more of those rescued. Aid workers in Libya say little is being done for migrants trapped in the country and blocked from crossing the Mediterranean Sea by the EU-backed measures. More than 5,000 migrants are currently detained in Libya in precarious conditions. Thousands of others are present in the country. Migrants are frequently exposed to torture, forced labor, and rape.
I think the challenge is not the amount of funding going to Libya, where over 200,000 people are in detention. It's what's being done with that funding. And the problem is that it's focusing on perpetuating a system of detention that results in torture, abuse of those detainees, as well as real healthcare problems like the spread of tuberculosis in close confined detention. And so we need to really think about high quality aid. And so thinking about the money going to Libya, we need governments, as well as the Libyan government and the EU, to work together to improve conditions so that aid can be more effective and go further.
The death toll after 2 migrant boats sank off the coast of Djibouti has risen to 52. 16 people were rescued following the sinkings, and 1 survivor told authorities there were 130 people on the boat alone. Rescue teams are still searching for the missing. On Thursday, the UN Migration Agency appealed to regional leaders to take action to stop such tragedies. The United Nations has called Morocco and the Polisario Front to have a meeting in March over the Western Sahara conflict. The meeting is aimed at promoting dialogue between the parties. Morocco and the Polisario Front resumed talks in December for the first time in 6 years. This conflict started after Spain abandoned the colony and Morocco occupied the territory. The Polisario Front is calling for a self-determination referendum. The meeting will also be attended by Algeria and Mauritania. Pope Francis is describing his upcoming visit to the United Arab Emirates as potentially history-making. He will be the first pope to travel to the Arabian Peninsula when he visits from February 3rd to the 5th. On Thursday, Pope Francis thanked Abu Dhabi Crown Prince for the invitation.
I am happy for this chance offered to me by God to write, in your land, a new page of history in the relationship between religions, confirming that we are brothers despite being different.
Press TV journalist Marcia Hashemi was greeted by cheering crowds as she finally arrived at Tehran's International Airport on Wednesday. Hashemi was jailed for 10 days at a federal prison in Washington. The 59-year-old journalist was arrested at a U.S. airport on January 13th. She was held as a material witness in an undisclosed case.
This issue that happened is a sign showing how important the Islamic Republic is and how much the U.S. are afraid of the 40-year revolution.
My mom, she was freed a few days ago. The reason she was arrested, they were basically bothering her because of her being an Iranian reporter working for the Islamic Republic, but because of the support of the media, social media, and the Iranian people, thank God that it helped the situation and to make the process go a lot faster for my mom.
The tomb of Egypt's ancient famed young king Tutankhamun has been revealed after a 9-year renovation process. The tomb has been renovated numerous times, but the effect of dust, visitors, and weather called for a plan to renovate the ancient burial site. The upgrade includes new lighting, wooden floors, a ventilation system to keep up with the thousands of tourists who visit one of the country's most popular sites. And with that story, we've come to the end of this news brief. These and other stories, as always, find them on our website at telesurenglish.net. And also join us on social media. We are on Facebook, on Twitter, and on Instagram. For Telesur English, I am Estefania Bravo. Thank you for watching.